Welcome to More Than a Few Words, marketing conversation for business owners. This is your host, Lorraine Ball. And today we're going to talk about Google because let's face it, if you're a player in the digital space today, you need to know what it takes to get the attention of Google and encourage them to drive people to your website. To have that conversation, I've invited Barb Davids to join me. She is the founder of Compass Digital Strategies, and she has more than 25 years of marketing experience, and she's not here for the fluff. Her passion lies in providing direct, results-oriented digital marketing solutions for ambitious business owners. And when she's not behind her laptop, well, she's out running with her dog, Stone, in whatever city she's in at the time. Barb, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lorraine. This is going to be a very fun conversation, I think.
I think so, too. I know when I tell people we're going to talk about SEO and Google, they're like, oh, but it's important. Yeah. It really is. And it's important because it's always changing. But if you're talking to a small business owner, what are the first things they need to keep in mind when they're thinking about Google?
I think the first thing to keep in mind is not to panic whenever they hear the algorithm is changing. It is a very, what do you want to call it, roller coastery or volatile-y, whatever the word is. It goes up and down all the time, and there's always changes happening. So I think that the first thing is to be patient with anything that they hear in the news or anything that's going on. There's nothing that they're going to be able to do immediately on their website to impact something immediately. So the patience thing, I think, is the hard one, but I think that's the very important one.
So being patient, kind of taking a step back, but also you mentioned before we were on air that you have this framework that you take people through to sort of set kind of the website up to be successful. Do you want to talk a little bit about that framework?
Sure. It's my SWEET framework. It's a SWEET framework, SWEET, like literally sweet. And it is, I feel like, a little bit different than a lot of people do with frameworks. It is taking it basically page by page. In a sense, I know that most of us as small business owners are doing our own websites and we don't have time to hire out necessarily all the time. So the idea behind the framework is something that every business owner can do, or if they have an assistant, that they can teach them to do it. So basically S is select a target keyword. So you want it, and it's not as hard as it sounds. It's basically just trying to figure out, okay, what are people searching for? What words are they typing in that I'm going to be able to show up for and be able to help that person with the challenge that they're having? So it's finding that target keyword. That's the general, or I guess the technical term. And then W we have is work on a blog post. So create a blog post or update an existing one to match that target keyword or that search phrase and help the person genuinely fix the challenge, solve the challenge, and just answer it quite plainly. It doesn't have to be anything overthought in terms of when you're creating the blog post. There are certainly things that you can do to be better about trying to show up in Google. But ultimately what you're doing is you're answering the question. And I think people make it harder than it needs to be. But even like saying, having certain words on there, that kind of thing, that inherently happens when you're talking about the subject anyway.
On that idea of answering questions, that has always been sort of the cornerstone of my approach to SEO, is because people really have questions. That's why they go to Google. And so just paying attention to the keyword, the question, answering it I think is so important. But okay, what's the E in the framework?
The E is enhance with summaries. So making sure that when you are working on your blog post, you work on that meta title and that meta description, which are the things that show up on the Google search results. Because effectively what you're doing is saying, hey, shop my website, and I want you to come into my website versus somebody else's website. So it's very important to spend some time on those. And then the next E is, now I'm going to forget what the next E is, and I just wrote it down. Sorry, 1 second. The next E is establish trust. So putting signals on your blog post that will give people or give the reader the comfortability that you know what you're talking about. So these might be like a bio page at the end of it, or a bio at the end of the page. It might be even just as simple as a contact page and an about page. There are quite a few websites that are actually missing those just really simple pages.
I'm always stunned when someone does that or just has a contact form, but there's no address, there's no geographic sense. I get that people are virtual. I understand that you can work anywhere, but I think in particularly old school clients want to know that you are somewhere, that this is Sketch. I think it gives you that legitimacy and helps establish trust. Would you also say that testimonials and reviews fall under that second E?
Absolutely. Even more so now, especially with the AI world and things being created out of nowhere, that definitely establishes that, okay, this is a real world. This is like, it could be like your friend down the street type of thing, but digitally. So it's like a word of mouth, but in a different form.
Cool. All right, so we have a T at the end of suite.
We do. It's tell the world. So content distribution is a big deal. If you put out a blog post, just putting it out once isn't necessarily going to do it. You have to continually tell people. I know that you get this with the whole touch point thing. It used to be like 20 years ago or something, and now it's like 5,000 touch points. So you have to keep telling people and keep pushing out your content so that even not only just the people who haven't seen it before, but new people coming in and asking these questions can see it as well.
People don't realize because they create it and then they're on to the next thing. But that process of going back and enhancing, you mentioned it as your first E, updating the content that you already have gives you a new reason to talk about that same post that maybe feels a little old. It doesn't feel old anymore.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a very underutilized tactic, frankly. I think people think that they can just put it out there and then just let it sit there, and then someday it'll miraculously start getting traffic. And while, you can find any report for any number, it is an underutilized thing. You can go back and you can either get a whole bunch more, or in my case, I have one example where it like went down and then went up. So it kind of goes back and forth, but it's definitely a tactic to use.
Well, we did that. We had a client who followed your advice with the W, where they answered one question and it always drove traffic to their website. It was a very fundamental question to their business. Well, somebody else answered the question too, and suddenly their traffic went down. So they just had to go back and enhance the blog post, write more information. And it is kind of a constant battle to stay on top, don't you think?
It is, especially when that's not maybe your first priority in your business a lot of the times either. So trying to find the time, I think, is where it's a little bit difficult. So I think tackling it like in a little bit of time each week or each month, that kind of helps. And then just saying, okay, this is my most highest priority keyword or phrase or the thing that people ask the most about my service. And then going through and just working through them and just like shuffling through over time.
Cool. All right. So Google is always changing. And even though you said at the beginning, don't panic, there are a lot of changes right now in the Google algorithm. You go to search, and all of a sudden you're getting AI generated paragraphs. And what do I do? How do I keep up and stay relevant in this new world?
So you're going to laugh at me because my first and foremost thing is to say that you do nothing. And I know that's like very scary to hear, but there is absolutely, as a small business owner, there's nothing that you can do right at this moment. Now, in the future, probably. But generally speaking, the AI overviews is what they're calling them in Google. They are pulling from existing sources and existing websites. So anything that you have been doing is helping your cause go into being able to show up there. I think the funny thing is that it's not even all over the world yet. First of all, it's only I think it's only if you're logged in as well.
Yes.
But the idea is it depends. It depends. It depends on the phrase that's being used of whether or not they show up. And it's still not a whole ton of them. It's more around like the how-tos and like the steps and things like that. So generally speaking, most small business owners aren't even impacted by these yet.
Well, I am going to guess that if people want to keep up with some of the changes in Google, one of the things they can do is follow you. So I'm going to encourage everybody, if you've enjoyed Barb's comments, to check out compassdigitalstrategies.com. Barb, thanks for being a part of the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This was so much fun. And if you've enjoyed this conversation and you'd like to find other resources for your business, be sure to subscribe to MTFW wherever you listen to podcasts. Listen to 2. They're short. This has been another episode of More Than a Few Words. Thanks for listening.